Well, hello, friends. Welcome to the Holy Ourselves podcast, a podcast about becoming more authentic in our faith, especially as it relates to sexuality and gender, as we figure out what it means to be whole before God, ourselves, and others in this crazy world. And as always, you can support this podcast by becoming a patron. There's been some good content. Christian and I just did an episode, and come on and join the fun, and you can get a lot more resources and support the podcast as you do. Today is a little bit of an unexpected podcast because we had a guest that I was planning to have on the recording I was going to release today. But because of the Supreme Court ruling on conversion therapy that happened, I asked very own Rachel Dowda to come back on. Hey, Rachel.
Hi. Good to be back.
I know you were going to hear from Rachel quite often because, as multiple people know, that I was telling Rachel, I'm like, Rachel, I don't like solo episodes as much. I'm not saying I'm never going to do them, but I love our dialogue. I think it's great. And also on top of this is about counseling. And as a counselor, I was like, who better to talk with? So I guess as we start, I'll give a little bit of a rundown for people, and then we can kind of dive in. Does that sound good?
Perfect.
Yeah. I guess, well, first of all, before we do, I do want to acknowledge that we are in separate rooms on very opposite sides of the exact same campus.
Right. We're like in the same space, but in completely separate rooms right now. It's like
actually, you're in the other building.
It's like when you FaceTime your mom, but you're both home.
You're both home. Actually, I'm looking out the window at the brick of the other building, and that's you. You're right there. So we're actually a lot closer. We're a lot closer. For everyone, we're doing it here because I am not at the podcasting level that I can have us record from the same room and not have to do a ton of editing. So this just makes editing a lot simpler. And so we're going to be in separate rooms, and it's going to be fine, and it's going to work. Great. Okay. So as we start, I'm going to give a little bit of a rundown. If anyone did not listen to the episode I did with Simon, who came on the podcast, gosh, that was a few months ago, I think. And we talked about this case right in the fall. Yeah. Because it was right after I was asked to write an amicus brief or encouraged to write the amicus brief for this case, as someone who holds to a traditional sexual ethic, is also a queer Christian, but also has gone through conversion therapy in different forms as a minor. And so this case of the Supreme Court was about a Colorado law that banned mental health professionals from, quote, efforts that seek to change an individual's sexual orientation, including efforts to change behaviors or gender expression, or to eliminate or reduce sexual or romantic attraction or feelings towards individuals of the same sex. This law specifically applied to work with clients under the age of 18. It's still allowed for therapy to be done of this type with this intention with adult clients, and it also had a religious exemption for pastors and ministries. So this was specifically mental health therapists who were working with clients under the age of 18, just to clarify for everyone. A therapist who, last name Childs, brought a case against Colorado on this topic because she argued that it caused damage she wasn't able to practice and help her clients who were seeking help, in this situation, minors who were seeking help towards related to their same-sex attractions or gender identity, gender dysphoria in these areas. So one of the things that we kind of assumed that this case was going to get lost, like Colorado was going to lose this case. It was assumed with the conservative majority that it was not going to hold. One of the things I was encouraged by when someone was talking to me about doing it was that even though, yes, it would be probably lost, that it's common in situations where, let's say, another conversion therapy case comes before the courts, that they will return back to evidence of previous cases. So
Okay.
even if it didn't make an impact in this situation, it could in the future. So that was one of the reasons why I did it. One of the things that was surprising about this decision, so everyone, I think I already said it, the court sided with Childs against Colorado, saying that it did infringe on her freedom of speech. What was surprising about it is that it was an 8-1 decision, that the lower courts had incorrectly upheld Colorado's ban on conversion therapy. Why the 8-1 is surprising is that means some of the liberal justices actually sided with the majority against Colorado, something we weren't expecting. I was expecting it to be kind of like a 5-4 decision, something like that, maybe 6-3 decision, but that's it. I guess just generally, that's like my initial spiel. I can go into a little bit of more of the details of it, but what was your initial reaction when you like saw the information about this?
Oof, I was angry. I had a lot of emotions about it. Um, I I was I saw an Instagram post. I actually think you shared it that I really appreciated. And the way the post defined therapy felt like you're just talking, you're just giving advice. Like it felt like it misdefined therapy. And like I felt angry. Yeah. And I was also surprised that, you know, the voting was so like almost unanimous.
Yeah. Yeah, that's just what struck me
Yeah.
about like, okay, what went wrong here? Because you're right, there's a lot of this came down to our understanding of therapy. And
Mhm.
that's kind of one of the reasons why this case has a lot of it has far-reaching implications, further than a lot of people would think, because it's not just impacting conversion therapy. The question at hand was, is the speech of a therapist when they are in a session with a client, is that considered protected under freedom of speech, under the First Amendment? That was the big question, and what the justices were deciding is what level of scrutiny this case should be determined underneath. For people who maybe are not as don't dive into, I don't really dive into like Supreme Court law a lot, but I dabble. But it's really important to understand that there are different levels of scrutiny that will be determined of how a case is upheld. And the justices decided that because this was a free speech case, that it had to be under strict scrutiny, which requires the government to prove that there is a compelling state interest behind the challenged policy, and that the law or regulation is narrowly tailored to achieve its results without infringing on people's speech to the maximum possible. And I guess it's, Colorado was arguing that they were not infringing on speech. Like Childs could get on social media and say whatever she wanted to. She could say minors should change their attractions. She could
Yeah.
say that minors should um, like heal their gender dysphoria. The question was, is in the session, is it an action or is it a speech? And from your experience, enlighten us on, like, I would love whatever insight you have on how you've had to engage with that when it comes to speech or action and therapy.
Yeah, like, you know, one of the basic like therapy ethics that like you can go on and look at like like the boards, and one of the ethics is to do no harm. That is like one of the main goals. And so what like frustrates me about this case is there is so much research showing the harm that conversion therapy does. So much research showing like the rates of suicide and depression and all of these things with, you know, queer trans like kids that are not accepted. And so the idea that this therapist, I'm trying to like have the angry part like chill out for a second, is like I should be able to say whatever I want to. It's like, okay, cool, but like you are ignoring statistics showing that what you're doing is causing harm. And so I had a thought in my head. I'm like, okay, legally she has free speech, but could someone report her to the ethics board and be like, she did harm and she needs to lose her license? I don't know. It would take a parent to do that. But if a parent is putting their kid in conversion therapy, the parent is probably agreeing with the therapist. And I think it's tricky because if it was an adult and they go to therapy and they don't agree with the therapist, they have the autonomy to be like, I'm not going back. But if you think of a kid who a lot is at stake, not only how they view themselves, but possibly the fear of losing their parents' love, the pressure, they might not stand up for themselves and be like, this therapist is saying XYZ to me. It feels even wrong in that way. But yeah, it's like you're ignoring statistics and like doing harm, which we've pledged not to do.
That's just the hard part for me is going, yeah, what happened to the credentials you have to go through in it and the understanding of how you're engaging? Because I mean, if a therapist I know, even here in Florida, was to just go and say whatever they want in these situations, there's many ways that you get held liable for that. And I think
Absolutely.
one thing you brought up that was making me think of something in my brief that I wrote. One of the pieces I was really trying to emphasize was that Childs was arguing that the minors themselves wanted to do this, and I'm not saying that it's never possible for a minor to choose this of their own. I mean, ultimately, nothing magical happens from the age of 17 to 18. There's no magical switch that gets turned on.
But from
But
12 to
yeah,
21, or above, that's a big, like,
there's
yeah,
a big difference there.
yeah,
Yeah. And one of the things I wanted to emphasize in my story was that I was one of those kids who was like, I wanted it. I wanted to do it. But now as an adult, I have realized I didn't have all of the information that was needed to make that decision.
yeah,
Because often, even a counselor who is desiring to do, this type of therapy is not giving you all of the information from a non-biased situation because it's usually a religious therapist
mm-hmm,
from a religious perspective, often. Um, they're normally engaging from that framework. And so the framework I was given is you leave the gay lifestyle, try to become straight, or you are not a Christian.
yeah.
Like that it's
Did it
incompatible.
work for you, Josh?
And
Did conversion therapy work?
oh yeah, it worked. I am 100% straight.
No, you're just a gay pastor.
I'm just I'm just the pastor that everyone assumes is gay the moment they walk into church. Yeah. It's true, but and I don't even really like the term conversion therapy. I'll often use like sexual orientation change efforts or gender dysphoria or gender identity change efforts because it is a very loose and like hard to define
Yeah.
piece, which is why I normally am very critical of laws on this topic. First of all, I do actually believe that adults should have the choice to do it. Personally, I do believe because we're not talking about shock therapy, we're not talking about like starvation or any of these things. We're talking about like talk therapy related to family, the belief that family wounds relate to all of these things. So I do think that adults should, but even with minors, I think politicians often don't understand what, I mean, this shows that Supreme Court justices don't always understand what therapy is.
No, it's not just paying someone to chat. It's
Yeah.
not like, oh, you don't have friends, that's why you go to therapy. It's like, no, a fully different thing, you know?
Hmm.
Yeah, I was even thinking like, what if a parent, because I do see, um, adolescents with the job I have in community mental health. With the private practice, I only see adults right now. But like, if a parent approached me and wanted to do convergence therapy, I was thinking of like what I would do in that case. Um, and yeah, just looking at the statistics alone, it just feels so unethical to ignore that and be like, but my free speech is more important. But I guess if they're not considering the statistics because their view is like, I'm saving this kid from hell, probably. I'm making that assumption. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think one of the most fascinating pieces I read in the decisions from the justices was the concurrent decision by the liberal justices. So I wrote down some of it here because I thought it was interesting. The liberal justices, Elena Kagan and Sotomayor and Sonia Sotomayor, who sided with the majority, they did a concurrent writing saying that a ban like this could permit other states to ban therapists from affirming LGBTQ identity. And that was one of the fears that led them to side with the majority. But part of me, my natural thing, and I've done some research and I'm realizing it's not exactly the same in legal sense, but I'm like, but isn't that what Florida's already doing? Like, isn't that, granted, I understand it's mostly in schools and schools are government employ, like teachers are government employees. It's the difference between a therapist and a school. But it's tricky because we're going into this same situation that's not being challenged here in Florida.
Yeah. I mean, I don't work for the school. I work in an agency. And if I see students or see kids outpatient, I could talk to them about being queer. But if I hold the session inside a school, like I go see a kid during their lunch, I'm not legally not supposed to talk about it because it takes place in a school where that law is, which is challenging and very frustrating.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very frustrating.
Yeah.
I guess, what do you see? This was one of the things I was processing, I think, kind of from the post that you mentioned before that
Yeah.
you
I
saw
saw
me
it because
share.
I think you reposted it or sent it to me, maybe.
Yeah, yeah. And it was, if it's the one I'm thinking of, it was the one that was mentioning the idea that if the decision of these justices is correct, that talk therapy is not a professional action, but a freedom of speech matter. Which, to clarify, some justices actually said that it was still a professional action, but still like it was both in a sense, which I think gets meh a little bit. But that if it's a freedom of speech matter, not a professional action, then the post was saying the implication is like insurance shouldn't cover it. You know, like there's so many ways of like, what does this mean for insurance if you're not seeing it through a medical, like professional realm? It almost is like deprofessionalizing. I don't know if that's a word.
Yeah. I mean, what's tricky is a
Therapy.
lot of therapists don't take insurance because it requires a diagnosis. So let's say this therapist is taking insurance. What is she diagnosing this kid with? I mean, usually
Mm,
it's like a pretty broad diagnosis because you're required. But yeah, insurance requires like medical proof. And that's why I imagine someone like her, I don't imagine she's taking insurance because it would be hard to make that work.
because does a diagnosis have to come from like the I can't remember what
DSM-5. Like, is it
the
near?
the DSM
Yeah, it's
five.
right behind me. Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. So it has to be a diagnosis from that manual,
Yeah. And
in a
because
sense.
you have to show it as like a medical necessity. But if it's private practice and private pay, people can go and process whatever they want and you don't need to have a diagnosis attached.
Okay. Yeah, it's just so that's been one of my biggest concerns in this whole thing was, it had the term conversion therapy on this case, but it felt like it was a much bigger question about what is therapy, and I've been worried that, and I've been processing this. I've seen some others who did some briefs or who have been engaging on this topic. Dr. Julia Sadusky is one. She has a lot of wisdom on this, and I similar to what I've heard from others is kind of this thing of maybe this is showing ways that we have not done enough work to show people like what therapy is
Yeah.
really and truly. Because I mean, granted, you would think we're a very therapized society, but even still,
Yeah.
it seems like a lot of people don't get it.
And we both, you know, we said in the last time we were together, we both see the same therapist, and
Yeah.
we do internal family systems, which I really love that, like, it's not using shame to change. And it's also not just treating behaviors, right? But, with conversion therapy, it's like, when does like telling someone like this part of them is bad and like shame actually doing anything helpful. Like if I had a kid come in and they wanted to do conversion therapy, my first question would be like, what do you believe about yourself? And if they told me like I'm sin, whatever, I'd be like, like, who are the voices telling you that? Because to have a kid come in, it's like, is it your environment? Like, if you didn't have those surrounding, would this kid really believe that they are bad and evil and sinful and all these things that and need to change? And so I don't think it's as black and I think, I could see it as like, well, if we make conversion therapy illegal, people are going to just like be in therapy and therapists are going to be like, go get sex changes in your school during the bathroom breaks, all these like ridiculous things. It's like, you know, asking like, where are these messages coming from? Like what would happen if you didn't change? What would that be like for you? And it's like, okay, is that where the fear of like I wouldn't be accepted in my church, I wouldn't feel safe in my home, like I would be walking around with disgust and shame? Those feel like more important things to work through, because those are people's experiences whether they're queer or not, like that shame, that fear of not belonging. And so I think even just going in and a parent saying like, I want you to do this for my kid, and the kid, like you did, like saying, this is what I want. It's like, is that what Josh actually wanted? Or was it more of the fear of like, if I'm gay, that means I'm not going to have connection and safety and belonging, of like, that just
Yeah.
seems like more important. Where conversion therapy is actually probably creating like, I mean, not even probably, definitely creating more trauma and shame, you know, later on.
Yeah. One question I have for you, I'm interested to see how you would engage it, because I can even talk about how I've had to deal with it in spiritual direction, is how have you like, let's put this scenario, maybe what would you do? Like, so you have the kid, maybe the adult, we'll say it's an adult for this current situation. It's saying like, I've believed that my attractions are evil, or however they put it. And then you ask like, where are you hearing that? And granted, no one always knows exactly where they're hearing it from the beginning. But let's say how would you deal with it if the answer the verbal answer they give you is, well, God told me? Because I've gotten that answer like in spiritual direction where
Yeah.
someone's like, God told you, and I'm like, oh, God told you. God
Yeah.
God said it. How would you deal with something like that in
What's
therapy?
interesting is like somebody that believes that probably wouldn't come to me as a therapist because
True. This is probably also true.
you know, I I market myself more like differently. Hmm, that's a good question.
Sorry, this is not a question I told you about
I
before,
thought
but it was
clients all
coming
day
up
and
when
my
you were.
brain is mushy. Um,
Your brain is mushy.
my brain is mushy.
I can say what I've done,
Yeah,
how
why don't
to,
you say what you would
like
say
how
and cut this part
I
out?
guess it's just I don't know. I think it's vulnerable, but we can cut it out if
I'm
needed.
just kidding.
Um, I think often when I've had these situations, I've had a few people who have come to me in spiritual direction and who are very committed that they believe that they their attractions or their identity in whatever format, because I know enveloped in this, and even in this court case, was also gender identity, um, was I've had a few I've had a few directees who have come to me and said, I believe that this is something I want to heal in my
Hmm.
life. Like, I want to ask God to take this away from me, or I believe it's rooted in my childhood wounds, because that's the core of like traditional conversion therapy. The idea of conversion therapy is, I'm taking the male perspective because they separate the female and male experience. The idea with males is you have the distant father, the overprotecting, smothering mother. You don't gain the relational connection with masculinity, whether through your father and your peers. You overconnect to the femininity, and then through puberty, that becomes sexualized. That's like the 2-second version. So the idea is to re-engage with the masculine side of yourself in a non-sexual way through peers and through yourself and some of these things, that you will naturally decrease your attractions. This is the general idea. I don't know how it works with gender identity, and there's some ways it does, but so how I've dealt with it before is to say, well, listen, where do you see that? Where do you see the trauma in your life? Like, do they point to their father? Do they point to their peers growing up, how they saw themselves. Because often the idea of conversion therapy is you didn't see yourself as man enough. You didn't see yourself as woman enough. You didn't see yourself as that. So I will be like, listen, I'll be very clear to them that I don't believe conversion therapy works in therapy. I don't believe it works in faith, but I'm happy to engage with the trauma experiences of their life. And whatever happens, happens.
Yeah.
Like, you know what? If your attractions change, I there are a few cases where I've noticed people that I'm like, I wouldn't be surprised if your attractions are related to trauma, but in very, very minute cases. So often what I'll say is if it comes to the question of did God told me this? My initial question is, what does it look like for God to tell you something? Are you talking about that scripture said it? Well, then we can engage with scripture. Are you saying like you had a feeling, like you had a peace, you had a conviction? Well, then we might do work around what's the difference between conviction and shame, those things.
Yeah.
So it's something I engage with a lot in spiritual direction.
Yeah.
So I was just wondering, like, that's why I was
I
asking.
I feel like I would, saying that out loud, sometimes like people think something or journal something, but saying it out loud is a different experience. And so I think I would ask them, I'd like pause for a second to give myself a chance to like, settle in that. I think I would ask them like, what are you noticing as you say that out loud? Like, what do you feel as you say that? And kind of go from there because like, the belief like God doesn't want me to be gay, like that's heavy, and saying that out loud, like, what do you feel in that moment? Like, does it feel like uncomfortable? Do you feel sadness? Does it feel like, do you feel anxious? Like, and I think from there, that's where I would continue with that emotion, you know? Um, so that's probably what I would do in that moment. But I feel like a lot of the queer clients I work with are coming and they're like, I'm in my mid 40s and I just realized I'm gay and I don't know what to do. And I'm like, we're here for it. Let's go. So it's a much different
Do it.
situation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think the hard part about all of this is that ultimately, I think I said this before, but I there's a guy named Wayne Besson. He leads Truth Wins Out. I don't always agree with him on things. I think he's like more, I don't know, maybe he's changed the last time I read his stuff. Last time I read his stuff, he was very much like faith isn't really good. Anyway, sorry, Wayne, if I'm putting words in your mouth, not like you listen to this podcast. But he wrote an article on, I think, LGBTQ Nation, where he was explaining that these bans on conversion therapy don't work. Like his theory was, they actually don't work. They're symbolic, they're important symbols, but they don't work. And as I was reading that, I was like, I actually kind of believe that's true. Like I would also agree, I think for minors specifically, they're really important. And I also believe in the religious exemption because again, as someone who's traditional believing on sexual ethics, my concern is there's some ways that these laws have been written around the states and around the world that would almost make my ministry technically defined as conversion therapy because I am often helping people live out celibacy because there's sometimes that these laws will say you can't help change sexual behavior even. And I'm like, isn't that what therapy does a lot? Is like, because like related to sex and related to sexual behavior, you're often doing it, maybe not in this format, or beliefs on sexual behavior and these things. So I often get concerned, but I was thinking how Colorado actually never prosecuted anyone under this law. That was one of my issues with Childs bringing this up is to bring a case, you have to prove that you've suffered harm.
Yeah.
You can't just bring a case because you disagree with someone. You have to bring a case saying, I have suffered because of this situation. And I guess her argument was that she suffered because in order to comply with the law, she's lost clients. That was her argument of her suffering, or her harm. And but in general, Colorado has not prosecuted anyone under this law. It really has stood more symbolic. And I think that's because, you have the change movement with Bethel in in where are they, California,
Yeah.
something like that. So many movements that you and I probably grew up with do some kind of pray the gay away
Yeah.
thing, you know, and those wouldn't be covered underneath this. And I'm not saying that it should be, but it's just made me wonder in this fight of like, how do we actually, I wonder this sometimes working in a church, how do we actually deal with this?
Yeah.
So it's one of
Yeah.
the things I keep wondering.
And I think my biggest concern is the fact that this is around children, you know, because they don't have the power to just be like, something doesn't feel right about that therapy session and I'm going to not go anymore, you know?
Hmm.
And you sometimes like, it'll work and they'll just like suppress it, or other times you see like the exact opposite and it just becomes more extreme. And I don't think there's anything wrong with like, especially for someone young to encourage, like, there's no need to be sexually active right now. There's no like you're middle school. Like
Yeah.
that's not necessary. Like just
Yes.
like live your life, like get like work on like self-care and like loving yourself and like processing these beliefs, but like to encourage a kid to like there's no rush to date, there's no rush for sex, like that's okay. But to go at it and be like, this is wrong with you and you need to change, like using that kind of shame message with a kid, maybe it's because I grew up in like very, very evangelical world with like severe OCD
Yeah.
that surrounded faith.
Yeah.
Like that kind of shame to live under creates so much harm that like as an adult will take so much time to work through. Like if adult want to go through conversion therapy, like I wish they would love these parts of themselves, even if they don't want to embrace them. But with a kid, it feels unethical. And I wonder if parents are really informed and either like they aren't aware or they'd rather have a kid that is very depressed or anxious than a gay kid. Or I don't know.
Yeah. I truly believe parents are less informed than we
Yeah.
think. I mean, that was the thing with my parents. My parents and I have had conversations about, the first time I went to the conversion therapy, um, it wasn't by choice. My parents took me to a therapist. And I remember just asking, I think I shared this in the last when I was talking to Simon, but I remember asking that we could stop going.
Yeah.
And as an adult, my parents have come to me since then and said we just didn't understand.
Yeah.
Like we were going off the information we had,
Yeah.
because I think also when you're dealing with a kid, I mean, I was in fourth grade, so it's very young.
Yeah.
I can understand where you think, oh, was my child exposed to something? Because they found out because I had looked at porn.
Yeah.
So your thinking is, oh, he was exposed to something. And then where are you going for recommendations? You're going to your church, you're going to your friends who are probably also evangelical, also come from a similar mindset. They're going to recommend a ministry, they're going to recommend a counselor of the church somewhere in the network. And you're going trusting the people that you did this. Now, that's most parents. I already brought this up, so I know you haven't seen it, but I was thinking about that clip that's been going around social media lately, and it's a judge, like a Judge Judy. This is not an actual court of where a dad was suing his 18-year-old son, who the son had found out the son was gay. I don't remember how, and then said he refused to have a gay son or was going to kick the son out if he was gay, and so the son found a program, like a conversion therapy program, or was like, hey, I'd like to go to this. And the dad was like, well, it's $6,000. Do you think I like the philosophy, but do you want to do it? And the son said, yes. Well, of course, the son ends up leaving
Mm-hmm.
because it doesn't actually work. And the dad was suing the son for the money that he paid to do this program since the son left, now that he was 18. And to hear the dad's arguments, I'm just like, it's heartbreaking because this is a father that I'm like, can you not love your
Yeah.
son? And I don't think that's the majority of parents. I think it gets scandalized on Instagram
Mm-hmm.
that this is what evangelical parents are. And I want to clarify, I don't actually think most evangelical parents are like that. I think many of them associate hardship with being gay based on the framework that they have come from. They know about the AIDS epidemic, they know about all of these things, and they don't want hardship for their children. And so they'd rather nip it in the bud than than that, than that whole reality.
Yeah. Or their kids like eternal destination
Yeah,
feels
eternal destination.
like
Also, don't want that for your
the
kid.
ends, justify the means kind of situation.
Yeah,
Yeah. And I
yeah,
think a lot of parents really do trust like the pastors in their life and the other books and speakers. And so I think like, if you want your kid to go to therapy, like great, but like research the therapist, ask them questions. What are their beliefs? See if they're tied to a church. There's a lot of mega churches around us that have therapy like programs. And if people weren't aware of that, they might think they're going to a regular therapist, not realizing they're getting like Christian therapists who hold the values of the church they're connected to. Like research therapists. Like I had a client that ended up it didn't work out. She came to me for like very, very Christian counseling, like maybe you'd get from a pastor. And part of me was like, did you read like what I offer? Like it, not like I
my
can't,
Bible.
like I probably could, like I'm a Christian, but it's like read, like do some research, ask questions, and make sure like who you're sending your kid to is a safe person, because of course beliefs slip in as much as therapists try to be unbiased. um but and you're right, conversion therapy isn't always, those aren't always the words used. There's other words used, but I think especially with kids to really notice like, you know who are you sending your kid to, and like what are they connected to. Yeah.
Yeah, one thing you were saying was reminding me of one of my early realizations with counseling that I think a lot of people in churches don't realize, that there's a difference between pastoral counseling and mental health therapy.
Yeah.
Like very different things. And I don't think we're told that
No.
in the church.
My first therapist when I was 18, therapy was literally going through Joyce Meyer's Battlefield of the Mind. And looking back, I'm like, my parents paid a lot of money for a book club. They are paying money for a weekly book club with me and this woman.
Joyce Myers, wow.
I mean, nothing
I'm
wrong
gonna
with, essentially it's like CBT with some scripture slapped on it, but like,
I was about to say,
yeah,
yeah.
so I mean, it didn't do any harm, but they thought I was going to like a mental health counselor, and really we were just like reading a book together. Um,
Mm,
it is different. And then of course there are pastors that do a really beautiful job mixing like faith and mental health. And so I think it's just really important to look into like who you're going to see, both as an adult and for your kids. And it's okay if after a couple of sessions you're just like, this isn't a right fit, you know?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's we've been talking about that there's evidence of this. And I think that's the saddest part of all of this, is like none of this is theory. There's legitimate, like verifiable evidence that the damages that these kinds of like therapeutic practices, not even just them, but like even the pastoral practices
Yeah.
that are used. And I guess one of the areas I was hoping was the Supreme Court had earlier seen a law of Tennessee that banned medical intervention for gender affirming care for trans minors, um, and seeing whether that was legal. And the argument was, and this is just me re-summarizing it, so I probably am getting it a little bit some of the details wrong. But the general idea of the Supreme Court decision was that states have a right to protect marginalized communities from practices that are under researched or researched to be harmful. And I'm like, hello, hi. Like,
Yeah.
I get that gender affirming medical intervention is just very under researched. Like, there's not a lot. We don't have a ton really on it compared to other things. Maybe there's more that's been coming. But when it comes to conversion therapy, we have a lot of details, I would argue.
Yeah.
And so I've always just kind of wondering how do you get pastors and Christians to realize this is not the way forward? Like I feel that always I'm always rubbing against that because the reality is there's a difference between identity and attraction and like behavior or ethics or the ways we live it out, the ways we understand, because I would argue one of the reasons why, even for me as like a side B, um, like traditional sexual ethic person, and I'd love to hear like, because our diverse views on this, but for me, it's been the thing of where I see good in my attractions.
Mhm.
That's why I don't think it needs to be changed.
Yeah.
I may live out and express those attractions differently, like in a non-sexual way, and seek to do it in that way. But there is goodness in it, of like love between people of the same sex. And that comes in a variety of ways. And I would say that's in Christianity. But this idea that this whole thing has to be erased completely is really sad, especially when there's an unwillingness to actually look at the data. And all it comes back to is, well, Leviticus 16 says. And I'm like, oh my God.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I definitely struggled with mental health issues throughout childhood, severe OCD, like anxiety, eating disorder for over a decade. And what's crazy is like I had been to therapy, I had been on medication, I had been to retreats, I did on-site, which was amazing. I went to residential eating disorder treatment, like all of these things, and they were helpful. But what's really like so special to me, and also I think is so interesting, is it's like everything finally clicked and I felt the biggest change when I finally like was fully out, where like my internal world and external world and my home life and church life and friend life, everything was aligned. I didn't have, I was like this here and like this there and then secretly here. Like everything was aligned. I started dressing the way I wanted to dress instead of the way I felt like I should. I like it's like I've let myself be fully me, and eating disorder behaviors that I had struggled with from 11 years old up until like 30, like not a problem anymore. When I say like I tried to recover from an eating disorder from like 11 till 30, like that's 19 years. And then in one winter, I like come out and it's gone. Like that, I know it doesn't always happen like that, but I think like letting myself just be me. I didn't go and become crazy hypersexual. I didn't go and like I didn't even like lose my faith. If anything, it became so much stronger. And okay, so let's say I like kept this suppressed the rest of my life. Like I wouldn't want that for myself, And of course, nothing's perfect and there's still hard parts. If anything, it's different hard. And what I think is sad is like there's a lot of people that just don't interact with me anymore that I was really close with before. And I wanted to be like, you had the capacity and the care for me when I was like suicidal, when I was like doing all these things. But then I come out and I'm so happy and like flourishing. And that's when it's like, we draw the line at that. We're out of your life. Like, I don't understand that. But you know, while I didn't go through conversion therapy, I've experienced like what it feels like to feel whole and to be me in every area. And like it's a beautiful thing. And so, when I see people feeling like they need to, you know, throw away these parts of themselves, like first of all, it doesn't work. You're just repressing yourself. And that feels really hard. It's like cutting off parts of your body, just like throwing it away. Of course that's
Yeah.
oversimplifying it, but I think you get my drift. I'm not being
Yeah.
filtered very well in this podcast. You're just getting me. You're not getting therapist, Rachel. You're just getting
I love it.
your
I want
friend.
Rachel, my friend, who can also be a therapist.
There you go. But yeah, I feel like coming out like literally healed my mental health at the
Yeah.
ripe old age of like 31-ish.
Well, and first of all, I think it's so funny how now I can tell sometimes really well when I see someone, and even if it's like a Christian person who's speaking and they're talking about their experience of same-sex attraction, I can almost tell when I'm like, "Oh, you are a ticking time bomb waiting to just blow
Mhm.
up because you're just so like I can see it." And it's not always the case. It's not like I think sometimes people think, "Oh, just because someone uses same-sex attracted language or because they're traditional or whatever that they're, married to a person of the opposite sex, they're repressed." Not necessarily. But that what you were talking about that like that fragmentation, that oh my god, after you've experienced it and then you move into integration, you see it, you
Yeah.
can notice it. And I think that's what sharing your story, which I'm so glad you did, I was just thinking about how I've gotten to watch you
Mhm.
grow in that because you've gotten, I feel like I've seen you grow in a place of going, you've learned to like allow God to love you as you. And I think that's the sad part that people wrestle with because they don't know how to, they feel like they have to let everything go to get there. And I don't actually think that that has to happen. And I think it's been really cool to watch how you've been able to um, really allow that in your space because, like, in your heart, because, and I've experienced that, and it's just, it changes
Yeah.
like the integration
Yeah.
piece,
And I
really.
will say, like, I was going through this process in a church where my Christian friends, like, were cheering me on, affirming me. They're like, yes, right. That feeling the love there was almost like it was echoing the love that God had and the love I was having for myself, where I feel like if I was trying to come to this place in a church that was telling me like the opposite, it would have been a much different experience. And so I feel like having Christian community that was also, and my Christian community is a mixture of side B and affirming. It's like everything. Um, it would have been much different. And so I do know that was a privilege for me.
Yeah, yeah.
It made it a lot easier, but I
It
just,
changes.
yeah.
I mean, the one thing this is another thing I was going to say when you said that you never went through conversion therapy, and I mean that's right. But I do argue, and this is a little bit of that fluidity of conversion therapy, that if you are a queer kid, no matter how suppressed you were growing up in evangelicalism, you grew up in the narratives of
Oh,
conversion therapy.
Josh, I have a memory of coming back from church camp. As long as I got church camp, crazy times, and stopping at a
Hmm.
McDonald's, and our youth group was there, and the youth pastor. If he ever watches this, I hope he hears this story. um, and there was a gay couple like in the McDonald's line holding hands. Literally, they were not doing anything but holding hands, standing there. And this man, who probably was like in his mid 40s, goes up to them and says, "Can you please stop doing that? I don't need my teens to look." And I remember feeling like, and I didn't understand why I felt like this because I had grown up in that same message of like, that just feels so wrong. Um, and like horrifying. And so, yeah, I definitely agree. Like, you definitely are, even if I wasn't aware I was gay in the moment, no one else in that group of us felt weird about it. But I was just like, oh, like, I want to go up to those two men and be like, "I'm so sorry on behalf of this man." You know? Yeah.
Yeah. It's like just water you swim in of those things. And that's where I've had both. I mean, hell, I had a moment where I remember like I was telling people I used to be gay. That's what I used to say. But it's because you're given these
Yeah.
narratives. You're like, and you're trusting around it and you're not exposed to the complexity of it. Like I remember in college when I was the first time I was ever processing whether I could be Christian as a gay person. And I remember everyone, the the Christians around me who were basically really ultra conservative, like ex-gay kind of people, and then my gay friends, everyone was like that. No, that doesn't. No one does that. That doesn't exist. And so I thought I was doing the craziest thing. Turns out it wasn't too crazy. There was a lot of other people doing it too,
Yeah.
but we didn't have like it just wasn't talked about. So
Yeah.
and you're just growing up in these narratives and then kind of putting on about all this stuff.
Yeah.
Well, I think we could, you and I could talk forever.
Right?
We love it so
We
much,
really
but
could.
this
Or
is
shared
great.
stories. Never
Share
have I
stories.
ever.
I know.
Confession edition.
Yeah. I know I'm going to have more things to say about this Supreme Court like ruling. Like I said, I was expecting it. We were in staff meeting of church when I got it, and I remember I kind of I teared up a little bit,
Mm.
and I that's really all I've cried through it. And I think it's because I was prepared for it a little bit. The 8-1 kind of shocked me, but like I said, I think the reason I really believe a lot of this work is on the ground, working with churches to do better, to be better,
Yeah.
to be healthier, to do the work with Christians and parents and make sure parents know that there's other options of how to engage with their kids. So I think that's the thing that makes me hopeful, that I don't think we depend on the law for these things. They're helpful, but I don't think that they fix it.
And it feels
I think it has
interesting
to happen.
that this is coming up around the same time. There's a big push to go back to traditional conservative values. A big push for like women staying home again and like all these it just feels sometimes I'm like it feels like we're going backwards. Like why? And honestly, in the scope of what's happening in a lot of ways, it makes sense. And yeah, there's a part of me that's definitely not surprised, but then I mean, I also feel
Mhm.
very disappointed.
Yeah, the one hope I take from this whole decision, if I can pull like one positive thing from it, I do think that the fact that this court, the Supreme Court, is a high valued freedom of speech Supreme Court, I think is a good, like, obviously, I think in some ways it goes too far, but I do think that's always a helpful thing, especially within our society,
Yeah.
because I think it then protects like all of our speech in many ways. Because ultimately, yeah, this thing is not saying a therapist can't affirm LGBTQ um, identity. It's obviously allowing open for things that are unnecessary, but I'm hopeful that whereas there a decade ago, I was concerned we were getting to the point where we were limiting speech to the point where I was like, I don't know how to say. But, at the same time, it was like, we're going to deal with it. Like, it's going to be fine. Because again, I don't think the law frees us. But I think it's just going to be challenging. I'm going to have more stuff to say. And I appreciate you jumping on with me for this.
Thanks for inviting me. And I learned a lot about
Yeah.
courts and laws.
Y'all, I enjoy it.
I know.
I
Josh
should have
is the
just
one
been.
where I'm like, Josh, please explain this thing to me. I don't want to
Well,
chat
I do.
GPT it. I want to ask Josh it. Remember Ask Jeeves?
Yeah.
From
Yeah.
now it's like
Yes,
Josh.
Josh. I I do believe that a lot of times when we see these Supreme Court hearings or like court hearings or anything, so often anything around the law, I always encourage people to understand the law better. I think it's your friend. I think it, for instance, the way this has been um, marketed by people, it's like people assume that the Supreme Court is deciding on the merits of conversion therapy. Well, that's not what they were doing. They were not giving a pro thumb or a negative thumb to conversion therapy itself. They really were actually talking about, is talk therapy a freedom of speech, a professional action, or somewhere in between. And conversion therapy was really the means to that. Now, granted, every justice has an ideological leaning and how they're coming in it, and I know Judge Justice is impartial of allowing their thoughts on conversion therapy to lean them on or other things, but and I think that definitely came into play here. But I'm just saying all of this. This is my last little spiel to all of my listeners, that I think it's really important, because sometimes when you do actually see like court decisions and you're like, well, that's awful. They're often not. Um, Lawyers and politicians are really good at framing decisions to get it to go the way they want to. And so framing this as a freedom of speech case was in this court specifically, was a decision that they knew they had a strong case for. So here we are. And that means someone else can bring it later on and can reverse it. So there you go.
Or just people could stop seeing that therapist and
Or, yeah. Yes. There you go.
just a little
Thank you,
salty.
everyone. I mean, honestly, I don't recommend Giles.
No.
Not saying she's a bad person, but we don't agree ideologically. Like, we just don't. We may hold the same faith,
And
and
those
a lot
clients
of
she
those things.
lost, they probably are feeling a lot less shame due to not
Yeah.
getting conversion therapy.
Yeah. The funny part is when she said what she does, I'm like, that's not conversion therapy. You're not doing it. Like, when she explains what she wanted to do with clients, I'm like, I still wouldn't necessarily recommend it. Like, she basically wanted to talk to them about God's design and, these things, like, whatever. Like, that's not conversion therapy.
That barely feels like
Like,
therapy. That feels more like
yeah. Yeah. And like talking about a child's desire, like, because a lot of it is she, and this isn't the entirety of it, is she's saying these like minors are coming to me, they want to change their attractions, they want to change their gender identity, and she wants to talk about that with them, and she's arguing that she can't talk about that. And I'm like, you can definitely talk about why do you want to change it, like what we were talking about before. Like, there's ways you can talk
right.
about this. And then on top of it, there's so many ways I was like, girl, I don't think you understand what conversion therapy is. So here we are. All right, listeners, thank you so much.
Maybe she can get on
for
your podcast next to explain it for herself.
Have Giles on. I would totally.
I know, and you do a beautiful job too.
People, if you have ideas of who I should have on this podcast that maybe like we could have healthy debates on, I would love it. I was thinking about that, of who could I ask. The hard part is so many conservative Christians won't come on and debate, ironically, because they believe that they are validating heresy. I don't know. Like, I'm like, really, that's just a cheap like reasoning, because you can't have discussions. You can't have Anyway, I digress. But we should. Giles, if you listen and you want to come on. Or listeners, if you have an idea of someone who we should have on, tell me. I'm up. Why not? We can send an email, see if they'd be willing. So thank you, Rachel. Appreciate it. As always. Thank you, listeners. As always, please listen and subscribe. If you're on YouTube, please subscribe. It helps other people find us. And leave a review wherever you are. Give us a thumbs up on YouTube, a review on Spotify, on Apple. And remember, you can send voice messages, questions, comments through the SpeakPipe that is in the show notes. It's on the website. If you would like to do that, to have it on the podcast, and we'll respond. And you can go to the website, holyourselves.org, if you are interested in spiritual direction or cohorts. I'm hoping to do a cohort this fall. I just need to get the book done, and then we'll do another cohort, Becoming Whole cohort. Newsletters will be out every month on Substack. That's also in the show notes. And as always, you can join on Patreon to support the podcast and get more resources. And until then, we'll be back in 2 weeks. I'm going to be talking to Bill Henson about some different things. My old, posture shift, my old home. Going to be having a really good conversation. I can't wait to hear you guys to hear that. And then Beth, a fellow spiritual director, Dr. Beth, she's going to be on, and we're going to talk about spiritual direction in a month.
Amazing.
So thank you, everyone. Love you all. Love you, Rachel. We'll talk to you soon.
Again. Bye.
Bye, everyone.